Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's event with the title Gender Differences in Mobility After Childbirth and Implications for Gender Gap in Employment. My name is Mahdi Qotsi, and I am an economist from the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. And today's presenter is Andrea Albanese, and he's an economist from Luxembourg Institute of Socio-Economic Research, or LISER. And this event is part of the series in seminars in international economics that are organized by the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies and in cooperation with Research Center International Economics, or FIW. And usually these seminars in international economics are intended to be a forum for presenters and discussion of current research findings in the field of international economics, which are focusing on three major topics: international trade and trade policy, foreign direct investment, and labor economics and migration. So in order to give you the rules of housekeeping, the events usually start with a presentation of about 30 to 40 minutes. And usually afterwards, we will have a Q&A session, which takes about 20 more minutes. And usually participants have the opportunity to ask their questions in the chat function. You can type your questions and I immediately see the question. And if the question is very important and pressing that helps us understand the topic better, I ask the question immediately at that time. And I talked with Andrea before, and he was also agreeing that if anyone has any question, you can also interrupt during the presentation. But if you don't, I collect the questions for the for being moderated at the end of the session, and you have the chance to unmute yourself and perhaps turn on your cameras so that we can see you, and then you can join the discussion, put your comments, and ask your questions. And usually after the event is finished, we will send you an online survey, which will be sent by email to you, and we hope that we receive some feedback from you so that we can improve the future events in seminars in international economics. Actually, this is our last seminars in international economics this semester before summer holidays, and after summer holidays we will get back by another seminar in mid-September. So I hope you can follow the links on Wiiw website so that you can get familiarized with the next and future seminars. And one important notice is that this event today will be recorded and it will be uploaded to our Wiiw YouTube channel so that anyone who missed this session could watch the seminar later. And also, and Andrea was so kind to give us the slides so that they will be uploaded on the Wiiw website so that you can have the chance to also observe the slides. And finally, the introduction for the speaker. Andrea Albanese is a research scientist at Luxembourg Institute of Socio-Economic Research, LISER, and he's affiliated at Ghent University, Belgium, ESA in Germany, GLO in the Netherlands, and University Catholic de Leuven in Belgium. His research interests are labor economics, causal analysis, and policy evaluation, and his papers have been published in good high-ranked journals such as Labor Economics, Oxford Economic Papers, Empirical Economics, Economics Letters, amongst others. He completed a joint PhD program at DEFAP, which was a joint program between Bicocca and Cattolica University in Milan, where I had the chance to be a classmate of Andrea. And he had the joint PhD program between DEFAP and Ghent University in Belgium. So he defended his thesis in December 2015. And he is currently managing a large research grant as principal investigator, covering topics related to causal inference, policy evaluation, and cross-border employment, which are funded by the Luxembourg National Research Fund. So, Andrea, thank you for accepting our invitation, and The topic is very catchy. I like the topic, and it's the focus of policymakers and academia both. So I'm eager to hear what you're presenting today. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mahdi, for the nice introduction. So this paper, as you said, is entitled Gender Differences in Mobility After Childbirth and Implication for the Gender Gap in Employment. It is a temporary title, actually, because it's still a work in progress. So your feedback is very much welcome. And we are going to formalize it over the next weeks in a discussion paper. So this is a great time for us to present our work to you. And it's a joint work with Adrian Nieto from Leiser, who is also attending the presentation, and Costantino Tatzinamos from Leiser and Luxembourg University. And as said, it was supported by the Luxembourg National Research Fund in 2017. We are finishing the research grant right this month, actually. So to start, we know from the previous literature that gender gap have been declining over the last decades. However, children have also become the main driver of gender inequality in the labor market. And this is the case since mothers usually experience a very large drop in many labor market outcomes after a childbirth, such as in labor market participation and in employment rate, in working hours, they start working more part-time, occupational status, and also the probability of working in higher paid jobs and in better positions. However, not much is known about the role of job location adjustments due to time constraints that childbirth brings. And this is pretty relevant because we know that over the last decade, labor mobility has been increasing and non-local jobs have become more common. For example, in 2020, in Europe 27, 7.3% of the workers worked in a region different from the region of residence. And for region, I'm talking about NUTS2 region as provided by Eurostat. And this represents an increase of 36% from 2005. However, at the same time, we also observe that there is a widening in gender gap for non-local jobs. And there is an increase of this gap by 25% over the same period. And this is opposite to what we observe about overall employment. So gender gap employment has been decreasing, but gender gap in non-local employment have been increasing. And this might be a source of concern because non-local jobs usually are better paid, but they also require the individual to commute farther away. And we know that mothers tend to commute less, and these result in gender differences in earnings and possibly employment. So this is what we want to investigate in this paper, whether childbirth is contributing to this gender gap in non-local jobs. And in particular, we aim to provide causal evidence on the role of job location on the effects of childbirth on the gender gap in employment. What we are going to do is first to estimate the effect of childbirth on gender gap in employment, as been already done in other papers. We are going to do it as well. And second, we are going to see how much of this gender gap is due to gender gap in local jobs and how much is instead due to gender gap in non-local jobs. Then, after looking at this, we are going to investigate the potential mechanism of our findings. And in particular, first, we're going to look at the individual opportunity cost of home production. So we're going to estimate effects for higher paid jobs, which should have a higher opportunity cost of home production, or lower paid jobs that usually have a lower opportunity cost of home production. Then we're going to analyze the effect of on gender gap if this is heterogeneous according to the partner labor status, whether it's higher or lower when your partner is active or non-active, because the activity status of your partner might ease your time constraint to take care of children. And then also to see whether the gender gap and the gender gap in location is affected by the situation and the condition of the local labor market where the individual lives. And all of this will help us to understand what's going on behind our main findings. Then, compared to the previous literature, we also make a methodological contributions in the sense that recent studies have been using event study approaches to assess the effect of childbirth on gender gap. But these event studies tend to be biased if there is heterogeneity in the treatment effect across groups. And in this case, we are going to use the Calorie and Santana estimator of 2020, which is robust to the source of bias that might come from a wrong implementation of the two-way fixed effect estimator. So we will make also some contribution in this regard. So our finding summarized as follows. First of all, we see that indeed there is a gender gap in employment that is due to childbirth. So whatever gender gap that was there before the childbirth gets wider after a child arrives, the first child, we are focusing on the first child. And what we see is that 75% of this gap is due to gap in non-local jobs. And these, again, are jobs that usually tend to pay more, especially in our setting. I will show you later why our non-local jobs are better jobs than local jobs. And what we observe is that mothers tend to give up their non-local jobs, regardless of any characteristics that we check. So they have a drop in non-local employment that is invariant to the opportunity cost of home production. So both, if they are high wage workers or low wage workers, they still drop. They drop regardless of the partner labor status and regardless of the local labor market condition. On the other hand, men are more sensitive to these characteristics. So we find evidence that men trade off better employment opportunities with longer commuting following childbirth. And indeed, their non-local employment tend to be resilient in case they have a higher opportunity cost of home production, if they are higher wage workers, while the partner is inactive. Therefore, they don't need to be close to their place of residence because there is already the mother taking care of the child, and whether they face adverse local labor market conditions. So when there are not many jobs locally, they tend to work farther away. Women don't do this. Seems indeed that women tend to prioritize childcare provision over labor market provision following the childbirth. And these are the summary of our findings. So which data do we use for this analysis? We rely on administrative data of Social Security from Belgium. So we focus on Belgium, specifically on one area of Belgium, as I will show you. And we have longitudinal information on the labor market status of individuals from 2007 to 2017. We observe 10 years of employment, residential location, and other things. Specifically, we have the household composition of the individual, the quarter of birth of the household members, the age of the household members, and then quarterly information on employment history and more aggregate information for other outcomes, such as the district of residence at NAT3 level, semester information on the place of work, the municipality of work, and whether they work abroad. This is even in monthly format, actually. Then what we do, we complement this data set with TomTom GPS data, which means that for each individual, we attach the theoretical commuting time that they might take if they want to commute by car during rush hours from their commune of residence to the commune of work. So this is not the actual commuting time, but is what they should take on average from their place of residence to their place of work. And in case the individual works abroad, and as I will show you, 98% of the individuals that work abroad, they work in Luxembourg, we impute that they work in Luxembourg City. because we don't know exactly where they work, but the majority of cross-border workers tend to work in Luxembourg City. We will do some sensitivity, and we will check whether this distance matters in our results, and if we assign that they instead commute to the border, so their job is as close as the border is, then we still get very similar effects. So it is not sensitive to this. So our sample of individuals is composed, is drawn from a population of relatively young individuals that are born from 1973 to 1990. And we impose that they should have lived for at least 1 year in an area of Wallonia that is not too far from the Luxembourgish border, specifically from the province, in the province of Luxembourg or of Liège during 2007-2017. So for people that don't know, so this is the area that we are considering. So this is Belgium. The southern part of Belgium is Wallonia, that is usually the poorest, that is considered the poorest part of Belgium. And we are focusing on this area that is relatively close to the small country of Luxembourg. So Luxembourg is small, but is a relatively rich country. Well, this is France, this is Germany, and here you can see the Netherlands. So our individuals need to have lived at least 1 year in this area, and then they can move anywhere else. We keep on following them, and we keep on seeing their employment outcomes as long as they remain in Belgium. If they go out from Belgium, then they drop out from our sample. So why do we focus on this area of Belgium? The reason is that this area of Belgium is very interesting because there is a very high level of mobility. In particular, this is the first NUTS2 region in EU for the share of individuals working abroad while living in this area. So we see that 32% of workers living here work in another country. So this is from a labor force survey of Eurostat. And why it is the case? It's the case because Luxembourg tend to provide much better employment opportunities. For example, if we look at the household disposable income of the average in Belgium, and we compare it to the average of Luxembourg, we see that in Luxembourg, individuals have a higher household disposable income of about 30%. And this is a lower bound because the Belgian average includes also Flanders, which tend to have a higher disposable income. While here we are focusing on a part of Wallonia that doesn't have actually a lot of economic activity. So the differences in wages and in potential and in jobs is pretty big. This is what brings. It brings that about 50,000 Belgian residents every day commute to Luxembourg for working, while remaining, they keep on living in Belgium. And therefore, individuals that want to pick up this better job in Belgium, they have to commute long. They have to commute far away and get stuck in the traffic. This 50,000 is a big number for Luxembourg. It's about 11% of the workforce of Luxembourg. And if we sum up also the other cross-border that comes from Germany and from France, we reach almost half of the workforce of Luxembourg. So there is a massive amount of workers that enter and exit the country every day. And these individuals, they decide to stay a long time in traffic to have a higher wage, or even to work, because there are not many works near in this area. So as said, 98% of our sample that works abroad works in Luxembourg. So there is a remaining 2% that works in other countries, but this is almost not significant. And we have a sample of individuals of 54,000 individuals that either have their first child between 2007 and 2017, or do not have any children in this period. This is a large sample because it represents about 74% of the total population of this area, corresponding to this area and born between in these years, and that should have lived in this area of Wallonia in this period. And we have up to 2 million individuals quarter observations during the full period. Then we're going to look at several outcomes before and after the childbirth event for women and for men. And in particular, we will focus on employment rate. Then we will divide employment rate between employment rate in the same region of, in the same district of residence, or employment rate in another district of residence. Then for the another district of residence, we are going even more in detail, and we will look at employment rate abroad, which is mostly, as I said, in Luxembourg. And I said these are very interesting because long commuting time, but high wages. Then we will consider whether the individual has changed the district of residence in the last year, whether the theoretical commuting time by car for going to work, and then employment in higher or lower paid jobs. And we define a higher paid job, a job that is paying above the median, which is defined specifically for each gender. So we have 109 euros gross per day for women and 114 euros gross per day for men. This is in real terms, 2010 prices. And these, the first, let's keep in mind, are unconditional outcomes, is 1 or 0 otherwise. We don't have any missing. And so these are the descriptives of our sample. I'm showing to you some outcomes, the main outcomes of our analysis. The first column is for women, pulling all the observations that we have. The second column is for men. The third one is for women after the birth. And then we have women men after the birth. And if we see these outcomes, there are not large differences between men and women, which is in line with what has been said before, that gender gap has been reducing in the last period. We see that employment rate is 66% for women, and 68% for men. Then local employment rate is a bit higher for women, 28 versus 25 for men. Non-local employment rate is higher for men, 38 versus 33. Cross-border employment rate is 12 for women, 16 for men. Then numbers of people changing residence in the last year is 10% for both. And commuting time by car is 34 minutes for women and 38 for men. What is instead evident is that as soon as we start comparing the two columns after the birth, all the differences become large. So the employment rate, of course, it goes up because individuals in this column are older, but the difference between the two columns becomes larger. And this is the same for all the outcomes that we consider. So it looks like that indeed childbirth might have an effect in widening the small gap that we have seen here. But this is not causal. Nothing here is causal. It's just descriptive evidence. So what we are going to do to estimate the precise effect of childbirth on gender gap is to implement a difference in differences estimator of Calorie and Santana.
Sorry, Andrea, one question. Why is it that the local employment rate after why is it that local employment is generally higher for women?
Because they have a preference of working nearby. That's the thing of this paper. We will show that women prefer working near, while men prefer. The men are a bit different instead. Women are ready. As I said at the beginning, we will show that the large gender gap that we estimate is mostly coming from non-local jobs, which means that women drop non-local jobs, far jobs, and either move totally out of the labor market or they start working more locally. So that's the thing. And
this is the characteristic of this region in Belgium, right?
This is our specific sample, yes.
Yeah, so, but this is not evident in all other regions in the EU, right? This
no,
is specific.
It's just ours, yes.
Okay.
It's just our sample.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
So methodology. The treatment that we consider is the occurrence of the first child. And we are in a staggered setting because individuals can enter the treatment in different moments from 2007 to 2017. And this treatment is absorbing. Once you have the child, you have it. So recent literature in this setting, like Cleven et al. 2019 of American Economic Journal, have used two-way fixed effects estimators for estimating the effect of childbirth on gender gap. And these estimators are able to take into account for time invariant and observed heterogeneity that individuals with children and individuals without children might have. So thanks to this estimator, you are able to control for invariant differences between individuals that decide to have children and individuals that decide not to have. And the identifying assumption of this estimator is that in the absence of the treatment, the two groups, the treated and the controls, would keep on having the same evolution of the outcomes. So they can be different, but they should follow a similar trend. So this is the parallel trend assumption of the difference in difference estimator. And these analyses are run separately for men, comparing men that have a child at a certain moment to men that do not have a child in that moment, and then for women. And then the estimates, the relative effects, are compared across the two genders to see whether the gender gaps widening or become smaller after the event of the child. However, it has been shown recently that this two-way fixed effect estimator, if it's not well specified, and usually is not well specified, might be too restrictive because it imposes homogeneity in the treatment effects across treated group and across time. And if the treated groups, which are birth cohorts, have different treatment effects, then the treatment effect that is obtained by this estimator is biased. And what has been proposed, there were many estimators that were proposed in the last 2 or 3 years, and what we use is the Calorie and Santana estimator, which is basically taking the full data set, like a two-way fixed effect. That two-way fixed effect is just run an OLS regression on the full data set, and then it does some extrapolation that might be weird if you do not allow for enough flexibility in the model. So Calorie and Santana instead divide the sample, your observation, in many differences estimator, in many differences estimator 2 by 2. So basically it's gonna identify and estimate the average treatment effects for each birth cohort and each time period after the childbirth. So the birth cohort is defined by individuals that have a child by time D. So all individuals that have a child in that time D, not by, but in that time D. So whoever has the child in time D will belong to the same birth cohort. And then we're going to look at effects at time T, which is after time D, before if you want to estimate placebo test, but let's look only after for the moment. And we are going to estimate the treatment effect for each birth cohort and each time. And this is done by comparing the evolution of the outcome, which is this, for the treated, minus the evolution of the outcome for the control. So this is the standard 2 by 2 difference in differences estimator. How the treated evolves in a different way compared to the controls. And the assumption is that they should have evolved in the same way if there was no treatment. So any deviation of the evolution is due to the treatment effect. This is how the difference in differences estimator works. So here I'm writing this, we are writing this D minus deltas minus 1 is because we want to leave an anticipation period. We know that, of course, before the childbirth there is pregnancy. So something might already go on there. So we allow for 1 year of anticipation period, which means that our baseline moment when we measure the outcome will be before 1 year. So the period right before 1 year, which will depending on the outcome that we use. And yes, so this is a standard diff in diff. There is just a normalization for having the same sample size for the two groups. And basically, we are going to estimate many differences in differences estimator. And then we are going to aggregate them up to obtain the average treatment effect for each time period after the birth. So we will have it for 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, up to, we are going to reach up to 7 years after the birth. And as done in the previous literature, we will show relative effects by dividing this effect by the predicted average outcome in the absence of the treatment for the treated, because gender gap is something that should be assessed in relative terms, because 1 percentage point for women matters usually more than 1 percentage point for men because they have a lower employment rate. And as said, The identifying assumption of this diff in diff estimator is the parallel trend, but we are going to relax it like the previous literature has done by imposing that it should hold only conditionally on age. So we will control for age in a pretty flexible way by adding here dummies, and this makes our estimator the conditional differences and differences estimator, which means that the parallel trend is imposed only for individuals with the same age. Individuals with the same age should have the same trend, but individuals with different age can have differential trend. And then as robustness, we will also control for last job information. So women or men having a child will be matched to women or men not having a child, but with similar labor market information. I said match, but it's not really a matching estimator, as I will show you. So in particular, we implement the Calorie and Santana doubly robust estimator, which works like the previous estimator that I showed you, but now we have two new parts. So there is this term, this reweighting that now has been added, and there is this term that has been added. So let's focus on the first part. So this is the same of before, but now we are multiplying the control, the outcome of the controls, by the propensity score. Why we do this? The propensity score represents the probability of being treated at that time. So it's how much you control unit, you resemble, you look alike the treated units. If you have a very high propensity score, it means that you really look alike the treated units. So I'm going to give you a high weight. If you have a low propensity score, I'm going to give you a low weight because you are very different. So this reweighting is the so-called inverse probability in weighting estimator, which is integrated with the difference in differences estimator, as was proposed by Abadi 2005. So now, basically, we are imposing that there is a parallel trend on the reweighted control between the treated and the reweighted control units. So the control units are going to have the same characteristics of the treated after the reweighting on average. And the parallel trend has to hold only conditional on this reweighting. And then there is this additional part, which is basically is coming from Ekman and Ekman et al. And this is basically the predicted evolution of the outcome that is common. So it's the common time trend. It's identified and estimated on the control units, as is shown here. So the evolution of the outcome for the control units, but then is extrapolated to the treated, because that's what the diff in diff does. The diff in diff says the trend of the controls is actually also the trend of the treated. And if it's not, then this is due to the treatment effect. So we have two parts that should deal with this, parallel trend, and we just need one of the two models to hold. That's why it's called doubly robust. We just need one of the two models to be well specified. If instead we misspecify one of the two models, and we are actually just using one of the two models, then we would be in trouble. So this model is robust from specification of either the propensity score or the outcome evolution. So that's how the doubly robust estimation works. If there are no questions, I go on to the results. So this is the effect on employment rate. So the dark line, the black line is the effect on women, which is estimated. This is the aggregation. So it's the effect over time. Here we have quarters. Quarter 0 is the moment when there is the birth. Here -5 is the moment before the full year of anticipation. So it's our baseline. And basically these estimates are showing how much in relative terms the employment rate of women have decreased compared to the employment rate that a woman in that time should have on average. And the same is for men. So they are estimated separately on men, separately on women, and then we are comparing the two estimates. And we see that there is a pretty large gap. So this is employment rate, which also include parental and maternity leave. So if you are on maternity leave or parental leave, I still assign you as a 1. So if I exclude maternity leave and I put it as a 0, this gap is even larger. We have a gap of about 12 percentage points. This in relative terms is a bit different because here again is affecting relative terms. But here just to show you this is affecting in absolute terms, so without dividing by the average expected outcome. And this has been already shown by the previous literature. It's nothing very new. It's pretty consistent with what was shown before. So children are creating a gender gap in employment. And if we look at other outcomes like gross labor income, we see a similar picture. Now there is a big drop due to the maternity leave that I was saying before, because it's not in the gross labor income outcome of maternity leave. Total hours of work, condition on employment, or log of wages, a penalty in the log of wages for women. So these results are consistent with what has been shown before. Just that now we are obtaining them thanks to this estimator that is robust to treatment effect heterogeneity. But then our main contribution is from these slides. So now we are dividing between jobs that are local, 1, 0 otherwise, or jobs that are non-local, 1, 0 otherwise. And we see that the vast majority of the gender gap is coming from non-local employment gap. So these account for about 75% of the gap on the total gap that I showed you before. Then if we split, if we go inside this non-local employment and we consider as a 1 in the outcome only jobs that are abroad, we obtain this graph, 0 otherwise. And this is the effect on cross-border employment. I said this is very interesting because these are jobs that pay a lot, but you have to commute far. And it's clear that women are giving up these better opportunities to stay either at home or to work more local. But this drop in non-local employment might be due to 2 things. One is, I said, people start working more locally. Another possibility is instead that people move. So people are not working anymore in non-local employment just because they move close to the job. And so something that was non-local becomes local. So we are estimating in these slides the effect on moving. And we actually see the opposite. So it doesn't look like that people move closer to the job. They actually stop moving. So we have a pretty large effect of about minus 70% in the probability of moving. And this was evident also in the descriptive that I showed you before. When there is a child, people get basically stuck. They still move. There is not minus 100%, but the likelihood of changing the district, the NUTS3 region, collapses. Is similar for men and women because they tend to move together, but is a bit larger for women. And then we estimate the same, we run the same analysis, but on the log of commuting time. And we see that women start commuting less, while men start to commute slightly more. So it looks like that all our story is coming from giving up for women, giving up far jobs, while men, they don't. But both of them remain stuck in their district of residence. So what's going on? So as said, 75% of the gender gap due to non-local gap. Non-local employment, we know that impose greater time constraints than local employment, but it also provides better job opportunities. And this is evident for the case of Luxembourg due to these wage differences. And mothers seems to specialize on labor status that allow their childcare provision to the child. Instead, the men don't look to do this, doesn't look to do this. And we are going to try to get more insights on the mechanism by looking at the opportunity cost of home production. So we will estimate the effects that I showed you before, but we will divide between high-paying jobs and low-paying jobs. High-paying jobs have a larger opportunity cost than low-paying jobs. And then we are going to carry out subgroup analysis, heterogeneous effect, which is done, first of all, by looking at the partner labor market status. So we take our full sample, and then we go in the quarter before the birth, and we check whether your partner, sorry, the quarter before the birth, I said something wrong, at the baseline period, which is 1 year before the birth, and we check the labor market status of your partner. Your partner was active or was inactive. And we estimate different effects just for the active and another effects for the inactive. And then we compare them. And we do the same for the local labor market conditions. We go before the birth, 1 year before the birth, and we check the unemployment rate in that area, and we say, are you living in an area of high unemployment or low unemployment? And we divide the groups, the sample into groups. Although high is divided by the median or the quartile if we want to get more extreme divisions, the first and the third quartile. And then we compare the estimates to understand whether there are differences in the gender gap that I've shown you before. So this is the effect. So it's like before, but now we are dividing also by salary, whether your job is a high-paid job or a low-paid job, divided by the median of the daily salary. So the first column represents the effect for non-local jobs, and the second column is the effect for local jobs. And in the first row, we have high-paid jobs, and then here we have low-paid jobs. So immediately, if you look at this, you see that the larger gap is in the first one. So in case of high-paid non-local jobs, there is a wide, pretty large gap. While the gap is reversed, it becomes even reversed at the end for individuals in low-paid non-local jobs. So what's going on here? So we see, if we compare between rows, we see that women, so the black line, they have a drop in non-local jobs, which is pretty similar regardless of the wage. So women, even whether they have a high-paid job or low-paid job, they always drop in a similar way. They have a strong preference to renounce, not to work far away from home, and doesn't matter the salary. While the employment rate in local jobs is more resilient, as you can see here. Here it remains stable, here it goes down, but then it reabsorbs completely. So there is women are driven by locality. They prefer not to work far, but to work nearby. Men instead don't have this behavior. If we do the comparison between columns, if we compare high-paid jobs non-local and high-paid jobs local, we observe a kind of similar behavior. Same for low-paid job non-local and low-paid jobs local. So the gray line between when we are comparing across similar pay is similar. The large difference is when we compare across salaries. So if we compare non-local jobs, high paid, and non-local jobs, low paid, we see that the men here remain in the job when it's high paid, while they drop a non-local job when it's low paid. And the same here, high paid job local is positive, slightly positive, low paid job local instead is negative. So due to the fact that men are driven by salaries, women are instead driven by location, we observe that the gender gap is maximized for high-paid non-local jobs, and instead is even reversed for low-paid local jobs. So this is one of the first interesting findings. And of course, we actually don't have information about cross-border employment. So if you work in Luxembourg, we don't have information on the salary of cross-border employment, but if we assume, so right now cross-border workers are always zero, but if you assume that you are working, that cross-border workers are high-paid jobs, then we get very similar estimates, just narrower confidence intervals. So this, you compare it to this. Then here we are estimating heterogeneous effect across groups, depending on the labor market status of your partner right before the birth, 1 year before the birth. We don't allow the labor market status change of the partner because we know it's endogenous. We cannot do that. So we are fixing your group before there is a treatment effect. So we avoid this concern of endogeneity. And if we look at these graphs, we see that the larger gap is in the first graph, which is inactive people with an inactive partner and non-local jobs. Again, non-local jobs, first column, local jobs, second column, in individuals with inactive partner, first row, second row, active partner. So larger gap is for inactive partner, non-local jobs. And then the second largest gap is active partner and non-local job. So also here, what's going on? If we focus again on women. And if we focus on women, we see that if you work non-locally, the fact of having an inactive partner or active partner doesn't matter. So the black line here and the black line here are very, very similar. They are on the similar level. So they are irresponsive to the partner status, because in any case, women seems that they prefer or they need to work, to be nearby, to work nearby, not to have distant jobs. And so even if the partner is inactive, they still give up non-local jobs, which is pretty interesting. And instead, local jobs lines are more resilient. Again, as before, they tend to be closer to zero. It is different from men instead. So the fact that the gender gap here is larger than this is due to the response of men. So it looks like that when men have an inactive partner, they can afford to work far away. It's easier for them to work far away because there is somebody at home taking full care of the child that doesn't need much help. While if your partner is active, the employment rate of men in faraway jobs is more negative affected. So it looks like that they need to be a bit closer to home for helping the main provider of childbirth, which is usually the woman. Yeah, they are affected by the labor market status of the woman. So they are more free if the woman is fully at home taking care of the children. And what is also interesting is that when there is a slightly more positive effect on local job, there is also a more negative effect on local jobs. So it looks like that they work a bit more locally and they work a bit less locally. So these, there is some sort of compensation going on. And finally, we look at the gender gap depending on the unemployment of your place of residence. So again, no local job and local job. First column, first row is high unemployment, so individuals living in high unemployment area. And the second is individuals living in low unemployment area. What we see here is that the gap is maximized for non-local jobs of individuals that live in high unemployment area. And then the second gap, the second largest gap, is the gap always in non-local job, but for individuals in low unemployment area. So here, what's going on if we try to understand? So we see that women still have a large drop in non-local employment, and again, it doesn't matter if they live in a high unemployment area or they live in a low unemployment area. Their unemployment rate always collapse in a similar way if we compare these two black lines. The difference is, however, what happens locally, because that is the area where there is high unemployment. So if we look at a low unemployment area, women in a low unemployment area are able to keep on working because there are jobs in the area where they live. So their black line is insignificantly affected. While women that are in high unemployment area, they have problems working because there are not many jobs there. So you see that there is a large drop in employment for women in local jobs when unemployment is high. Things are a bit different for men. So men, the gray line, when there is low unemployment and their local employment rate is not affected. When there is high unemployment, their local employment rate is affected negatively because there are not many jobs where they live, so they are affected as well, but not as much as women. Women have a larger negative response. But the biggest difference is here, is in the first graph. So when there is a high unemployment rate in the area where you live, women cannot work locally, but they also do not want to work or they cannot work far away because they need to take care of their children. Men instead, they are able to give up their they're able to escape the local unemployment trap by working far away. So when men are affected by the local jobs, but they start by the local unemployment, but they start working more far away. Women don't. So women in high unemployment area, they are basically stuck and suffer the consequences of their of the high unemployment rate. While men are able to work far away. So these, if we look at the total employment rate, this, as I just said, can be seen here. So first row, here is estimates on the total employment rate when there is a high unemployment, and total employment rate when there is a low unemployment in the area where you live. So you see that the gender gap is larger when there is high unemployment because of what I said. Men can escape the high unemployment working far away, women cannot escape. So their total employment is more affected. So larger gap and smaller gap. For active partner, non-active partner, there is not much difference in the terms of gap, and is due to that reshuffling that I said before. So men start working more far away, but less nearby. So there is a full compensation, while women are completely unaffected by the partner labor status. We carry out many robustness tests to see whether some choices that we have taken are driving the results. So first of all, we control for a simpler specification, a quadratic specification in age, instead of having many dummies. Results are very similar. We also control for the last job type in the baseline period, whether the individual had a white or a blue collar job, whether he was a public servant, the daily salary, the working hours, and the district of residence. It doesn't matter. Estimates are again very similar. These are the estimates. Basically, you don't see much difference. Then we also estimate that the extended two-way fixed effect that was recently proposed by Wooldridge, because of what I said at the beginning. It's not that the two-way fixed effect is wrong. Is that if you implement it in the wrong way, then you get not the results that you want. And the wrong way is because if you do not allow for heterogeneity in the effects, then there is a problem. But if you allow for heterogeneity in the effects by fully saturating the model and saying, I estimate the effect for this treated group and for this other treated group, for this other treated group, and you put all these interactions together, and you also interact with the control variables, then the two-way fixed effect still works. So that's what Wooldridge is showing in the last paper, that you don't need actually to use the Calorie Santana estimator. You can still use the two-way fixed effect, but you need to specify in the right way, allowing for full heterogeneity. And then you aggregate up the results, like also Calorie and Santana are doing. So, and in this case, again, very similar results. There is no pretreatment period because Wooldridge in this baseline is taking the full pretreatment period as baseline and not just one. But again, the results are pretty similar. The two-way fixed effect classical estimator, the one that I said that might be wrong. Similar estimates, just worse pre-trend. So placebo tests are worse, but the estimates exposed are not so different. Alternative control group, we have used so far as a control group whoever didn't have a child by that time, but maybe he will have a child later or not. So at the moment we have used everybody to enhance precision, but you might decide to use only individuals that at a certain point will have a child because they are more similar to the treated group, or using only the never treated. So if we use only the never treated, again, very similar estimates. If you use only the not yet treated individuals that are supposed to be more similar, we of course are throwing away all the control group that is pretty large, and we are remaining only within the control group gets smaller and smaller over time. The farther away you go, everybody starts to have children. So you cannot estimate the long run effects in a very precise way. But again, so just wider confidence interval at the end. So everything at the end, we should be a bit careful because the control group becomes very small, but the estimates are similar. So just wider confidence interval. And then if we just retain a balanced sample, because right now some people might drop out from our data, but you see, it doesn't really matter. Balanced sample, unbalanced sample, similar estimates. And then if we change the distance to work, definition for cross-border workers, if we say it is half between the border, Luxembourg city, or it's just the border, we still get similar results and not so different for the commuting time. So, and I have concluded. We have shown in this paper that childbirth leads to a gender gap in employment. This has been already shown in the literature, but here we say that actually large part of the gender gap is coming from jobs that are farther away, that are not near to your place of residence. This accounts for 75% of the total gap in employment, the gender gap in employment that is due to the childbirth. Remember, I'm always talking about gap due to childbirth, not other type of gap. And this is the case because men do not give up their non-local jobs after the childbirth if they have a higher opportunity cost of home production, high wage, or if their partner is not participating in the labor market, so they don't have problems for the children because there is somebody else taking care of them, and whether there are adverse local labor market conditions. If there is high unemployment rate locally, they tend to work more far away. So men, they specialize on the labor market, while women seems to specialize on the childcare provision, and they drop out from non-local jobs, irrespectively of these dimensions that I said for men, and seems to be due to the time constraint, which is coming from the childbirth and is also coming from commuting far away. And we believe that our results are very relevant because we have shown that childbirth is reducing women labor market access to labor markets that are far away. And these jobs tend to be usually better jobs. And in our sample, this is pretty clear because Luxembourg is paying higher salaries. And it might affect their career because they are giving up possibly better opportunities for providing childcare to the children. And it also makes them more vulnerable to local labor market shocks, as I have shown in the graph for the local unemployment rate, because both the family seems to get stuck where they live, they don't move anymore, but women also get stuck in the place where they work, contrary to men who keep on working farther away. So I think this is all that I have to say, and I'm here for your questions or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. It was excellent presentation. It took, I think, 55 minutes.
Coach.
Yeah.
I try to go slower than usual.
No, that was good. So that's why I think some people who were attending left. but there are some remaining questions. I mean, there is one question in chat function. There are also some questions that I myself marked. There could be also some questions from the audience who are still here. Then I would like to ask the people who are already in the audience to unmute or raise their hands if they want to have a question. So before that, I asked a question by Ljubisa Nedelkoska. I think she's from the Harvard School of Economics, or from the, sorry, Harvard Kennedy School. And she asked a question in the chart on cross-border employment, page 20. Childbirth men have positive effect after few quarters. And how do you explain this? Is it somehow a kind of compensation for the loss of the female partner, or what is it?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, these are bad. I showed before. When we look at the effect on high paid and low paid, we showed that men start to work more in high paying jobs, and cross-border employment are the typical high paid jobs. Mm-hmm. So it is this specialization that I said. Mm-hmm. So men seems to be driven by salary rather than location, and mm-hmm. Which better salary than beyond the border in a country that has higher wages.
Right. So they move away in order to get higher salaries to compensate the loss.
Yeah, it's not really moving, it's commuting here because they keep on living in
commuting.
Belgium.
Right, yes. Yeah, right. So if there is no other question from the audience, then, well, first question is, well, of course, you chose only single child, the first child. I think maybe it was because of the methodology of Calorie and Santana, or because there could be also second child, which may have even a bigger impact, right?
So usually the literature shows that the first child is the one that has the largest effect because it's the biggest shock. Uh-huh. You don't have anybody in the house, and then suddenly you have the child to take care. So we are focused on this because it's the one that usually provides the largest effect. We could do the analysis again on the second child. We would have just to retain the population that already have one child and then rerun the full analysis on the event of having the second one. So we can do it. We haven't done it, but it's something that can be theoretically done. So right now, we cannot actually say whether the fact that we show is only due to the first child, because it might also be due to new children coming later.
Okay. Then in that case, I have a suggestion. So again, Calorie and Santana with Goodman-Bacon, they produced another paper after that. It's called Difference in Differences with a Continuous Treatment. So that you will be able to have more than one children in the sample to see the effect. Then there is a question by Judith. Judith, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question, or?
Okay, I can do that. Hi.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you took into account the different type of jobs or different sectors men and women might work, and then the clustering of those jobs in space.
So we, in a sensitivity analysis, we control for the sector where they work. It's not really the sector, but is white or blue collar, public servant, salary and working hours. So it is in the control variables in sensitivity analysis.
But like something like occupations or, different.
We have sectors in the sense of manufacturing, service, or even more detail, but occupation, we don't have it in administrative data. So it's just blue, white, manager, and usually manager are very few. But that's what we have done right now. Because you would like us to estimate effects on specific occupation, I guess.
Maybe
yes, that's
mm-hmm.
what I was suggesting, that different occupations are clustering in space differently.
Yeah, I think it has also been done in the previous literature. So we didn't go in this direction. We went more in the direction of location, because these things about high-paying jobs or managerial position is something that has already been studied before. Yeah, so that's also why we didn't go in the direction.
Mm-hmm. So one more question is that, so for the treatment you showed, and you said that you included only 1 year prior to the treatment, right?
The baseline is
the baseline.
We leave a full year of anticipation. So, for example, when we go in quarters, the baseline is quarters -5 compared to where 0 is the birth.
So why did you choose 1?
Is because 1 year.
Why did you choose 5 quarters, 4 quarters? Yeah,
it's because it's what is done in the previous literature, basically because of this. And because the pregnancy is 3 quarters, so we want to go at least a couple of quarters before. But if you are not convinced by that, I mean, if we look, I mean, if there are problems of anticipation, so if quarters -5 might be too close, because it might be already be affected because it's too close to the birth, you can also look at what's at our placebo. So if there is an anticipation in that quarter, the placebo before should fail, and they don't. So it looks like that is pretty, if there is some bias, it's not large. And the issue of going close, I want to go as close as possible because we are assuming that time, that heterogeneity is time invariant. And so I want it, I want to measure the baseline as close as possible to the treatment as to be precise. I don't want to look at your unobserved heterogeneity 20 years before, because it might have changed. And so I would like to be very close to the moment when I measure the outcome. So that's why we try to go as close as possible, but there is a problem of anticipation. So you want us to go far.
So as far as I see on this graph, the issue of reduction in employment rate for women starts 1 quarter before pregnancy. Yeah,
it's probably, people or dropping or unemployed, not looking anymore for a job in the quarters. But 0 is not a pregnancy. 0 is the birth.
Right.
So this period is the pregnancy, actually.
Right. Yeah.
So the effect might be due to the effect of pregnancy.
Interesting. So already people decide. So it's like your treatment starts earlier.
Yeah, but that's exactly why I take as a pre-treatment -5.
Yeah. Then I pointed some things. Let me see if I remember where it belonged. So local employment for women decreases, but in the table of descriptive statistics that you showed, I also mentioned at that time.
Yeah, but there are confining factors. There is age. If you look at employment rate, it's 66. After the birth is 79. But not because it's the birth that is increasing employment rate. It's actually the opposite. But it's just because here in this column, individuals are older.
Okay.
Because this is pooling everybody, and here also that's when they are very young. So don't look at this table too much, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. That's very good. So that's actually a proof for your methodology that it's the net effect of age and other characteristics that you add in your
and also differences, time invariant differences, unobserved heterogeneity. Also that.
Yeah. Jenny, raise her hand. Would you like to?
Not very well.
Yes, if you speak louder a bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's very good.
Okay, I was wondering if you have data on the education, and if so, if educated women are less likely to drop, and also if you have data about the duration of the job. So temporary employment, maybe women who had a temporary employment before childbirth are more likely to stop working, or I don't know, any data about this? Thank you.
So, thank you for the question. So education, unfortunately, we don't have it for the full population. We have it only for individuals that from 2007 enter unemployment, because education in this such a security doesn't register education, at least in Belgium, but it is registered by unemployment offices. So we cannot use directly education because we'd be only on a selective group, individuals that ever lose their job and register in unemployment. But what we have to proxy education is the last salary. So that was the idea of dividing the outcome between high-paying job and low-paying jobs, assuming that high-paid jobs are usually the ones that are better educated. So it should go in that direction. So, and then there was another question about the temporary jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
We don't have information either on this, but in Belgium, temporary jobs are not very common. It's not too difficult to fire, even though it's depending on the color of the worker. But I think it's not one of the countries where temporary jobs are so common as in south of Europe, for example. Okay. But even if we had it, in any case, we don't have it, so we cannot do anything about this. Of course, we could do something about, we could look at time that the individual on average spend in one firm, that we can do it. That would go in that direction. So you would suggest doing like heterogeneity for women that in the past were in temporary contracts, right? That's what you are.
Maybe, yes, why not? If you have data. Thank you for your answer.
Very good. So the graphs that you show for inactive and active partners.
Yes.
I was thinking so for the left one.
Yeah.
So yeah. So it is decreasing for both, but it is.
Yeah, for men it's also going up a bit before, but yeah, it's not much. It's not significant. Not anything is significant here for men.
Mm-hmm. So if it is for someone whose partner is inactive, it means that for both of them, it should be similar, right? So
you mean similar in which sense for men and for women?
So if my partner is inactive, then
your partner will be the black line because woman, while you are the gray line.
Yeah,
and you have a different response because women usually don't like faraway jobs, while men are okay with that.
So, but because I am my partner is inactive, I should do anything to earn, right? So I, as a man, do not will look for job anywhere it is.
I mean, that's why also it goes a bit more up than when the partner is. I mean, if you compare the gray line here to the gray line here, this is slightly more positive. So it might be a reason why you are ready to go more, to go far away because you want to catch the best paying jobs. So this is slightly more negative than this.
Okay. Then another.
And then, sorry, something too important to know here. And it's important to know that we shouldn't focus too much on the long run effects when we do this analysis, heterogeneity analysis, because this is more like a fuzzy design. So the group was defined in 1 year before the birth. So 1 year before the birth, your partner was inactive, but might become active by 7 years later. So that's why you should focus more on the short-run effects.
I see.
I cannot use your status, the status of your partner over time, because that's endogenous. That's part of the treatment effect. So I have to fix it before the treatment to be unaffected by that.
Right. So at the end, what is the policy implication?
Difficult.
I'm thinking if women, by the nature that they give birth, they intend to do so and they intend to avoid working in distant areas. So should the government compensate for the loss?
I'm not saying whether it's intentional. Might be something that they need to. Maybe that they cannot. I mean, they have to do it. So
yeah, they have to do it. Yeah, it's natural.
Not necessarily for natural, but also because maybe their man doesn't do it. So it's I cannot enter more in this because in any case there is no data about that.
Yeah.
So it's a bit difficult to provide a policy recommendation here, but for sure this low mobility that is induced by the childbirth might be a problem because indeed they are more affected by the shocks that occurs when the place where they live. So we haven't thought yet about the policy implication, but I think it enters more in the general discussion of the gender gap and what the policymaker can do, like parental leave also for father that might be compulsory, maybe.
Compulsory.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's beyond the scope of beyond the scope of this paper. But
yeah. Okay. So what would be interesting was also, in addition to employment wage gap also, because then the wage would tell us something about how much the policy should be, how much the policy replacing the unemployment, or something like income of the family, income of the household, or income of the person who is unemployed.
We have something on the log of daily wages. We have a small negative effect on women, and
it's employed wage. It's not unemployment benefit.
Employed. So you're suggesting to do an analysis on the total income of the household?
Something like that replaces the lost income. So that we know for sure at the end how much the policymaker should give this household in order to compensate this loss.
Yeah, no, I think we have data of this.
If the data.
Now we should have data on the total income of the household. So I think we can do something on this. Yeah. We can estimate whether the total income of the household is affected by how much, but there we are going a bit farther away from the gender gap because it will be the income of everybody.
That could be another paper then.
Yeah.
Okay. Then, there are some questions here that, is there any working paper already?
We will have it over by the end of May. By the end of May, we will have it. Great. And then I can send to you and you can make it circulate.
Yeah, excellent. So other people who would like to get this working paper, you can maybe check Andrea's profile.
Yeah, will be on my website in any case.
Yeah. Thank you. And anything else? Nothing else, I think. Yeah, that was excellent, Andrea. It was.
Thank you.
I learned a lot myself. Yeah, I usually say that when I have these seminars, one great door opens for me, and this was also another door for me that was opened.
And thanks for your feedback. I mean, as I said, we are about to finalize the discussion paper, so it's very useful to have this feedback now.
It's very rich. Your paper is very rich, so you have lots of things to discuss. I think it's already a long paper.
Yes, we can go in so many different directions. That's why we are trying to narrowing it down just to the location story.
Yeah,
because there is so much, and already there is literature about other directions, so we don't want to overlap too much with what has already been studied.
Right. Then good luck with the publication of the paper in a good journal.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks again for the invitation.
No, thank you for presenting. Thanks everyone who joined until now, who has stayed with us, and thanks a lot for being here. I hope you will have a nice evening after this, and hopefully see you after summer in the next seminar that will be after summer. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Ciao.
Bye. Thank you.